Winter is coming.
Where are my dragons?
In the Game of Thrones, you either win or you die.
The things I do for love.
A Lannister always pays his debts.
Chaos is a ladder.
Hodor.
You know nothing, Jon Snow.
We
are the Rewatchers on the wall.
I don't even know what to do with this. Stick it with the pointy end. And then I had to do the stabbing action. What is it?
Stabbing motion.
Stabbing
out,
motion for the blind.
Mitchell does a stabbing motion. The rest of the crew looks on incredulously.
Incredulously is the word. Hey, welcome to Rewatchers on the Wall. I'm back.
He's back.
Not to draw attention to myself, but I'm back. I was very jealous last week as I watched it in like my Disney World hotel room on a laptop. I had it mirrored to the TV, but it kept freezing. So
I thought you were gonna go off on like, oh yeah, in my luxury suite I had.
No, I was in the low end of the
my Disneyland.
It was pretty much
penthouse.
a really nice motel. If you've ever been to the low end of Disney. Anyway, I'm happy to be back, and this is.
Oh yeah, I've rode the Matterhorn. Yeah,
I slept in the Matterhorn. Like Corey and Sean sleep on Splash Mountain in an episode of Boy Meets World season 4.
I remember this actually.
Yeah. It's right before
iconic.
Corey and Spanka get back in front of the waterfall in front of the seas in Epcot. This is now a Boy Meets World podcast.
Whoa.
So we're going to recap the first season of Boy Meets World.
Episode 1. Corey wants a water gun. Mr. Feeney needs his his fence painted. Okay. Anyway, we're talking about Season 8, Episode 3. We are literally at the halfway point of the final season of Game of Thrones, and we just watched the hour-and-a-half-long slaughter of many wonderful people, and then the useless people from Essos, who we just sacrificed like they mean nothing.
Yeah, we'll get to that shit.
Oh yeah. Oh
no, I don't even know where to start with this one.
I was gonna say, do you want to break it down?
Oh yeah.
Your paragraph's probably pretty short.
Break it down.
I punched
Embezzled?
it up a little bit. Yeah. So
let's do
all
it.
right, season
Thanks,
8,
college.
episode 3. Everything that happened. Melisandre returns. The Dothraki blaze up, then are extinguished. The dead charge. Dany Dracarys is a living retreat. Sansa goes to the crypt. Dolores Ed is killed. Arya fights on the ramparts. Bran works into a flock of ravens. The Night King is hiding above Winterfell. The Hound gets real negative, then goes to Arya. Lyanna Mormont proves that she is worth more than most people in this show. Arya escapes into that library part from Resident Evil 2. You know the part. Beric and the Hound show up. Beric sacrifices himself to save Arya and the Hound. Melisandre gives Arya a cryptic pep talk. Jon and Dany engage the Night King in aerial warfare, and they win. Just kidding. The Night King just falls off his dragon, but he's still alive. But don't worry, Dany's going to Dracarys the shit out of him. Just kidding again. She gets the hell out of there. Jon is attacking on foot, and all the dead are alive again. Jon fights a bunch of zombies, then Dany lights them on fire. Then Jon runs to Bran, then Dany stays on the ground for too long. Then her dragon gets covered in zombie ants, and Jorah saves her. Now everyone is moving like they are in a really dope music video. Now Bran is a better dad to Theon than his own dad. Then Theon dies. Here comes the Night King. All the White Walker dudes are just looking fly as hell. Still in a music video. Night King is going to kill Bran. Just kidding. Here comes Arya to kill the Night King, and now they're all dead.
That was good.
Yeah, that's all the dead.
Did you guys want to see the other White Walkers in action a little bit?
Yes.
I mean, they died kind of easily. Like Sam
I'll add it
killed
to the
one,
list
Jon
of things
killed
I was
one easy.
disappointed I didn't see.
I mean,
wow.
The only time we've really seen them was Hard Home, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Jon kicked his ass.
Yeah.
Because
I mean, that was cool though. That was cool. That was
I
like
assumed
cool thing
like
to see.
it wasn't because he was like wasn't expecting it, you know. But
yeah.
man, that's one thing it's one cliche I wanted in this episode was like the one-on-one duel for someone to have.
Yeah.
Even if Jon doesn't kill the Night King, I want him to have that duel. Then maybe like some dead come in and interrupt, and like he has to fight them while he walks off, type of thing. I don't know. That's a crowd pleasing thing I really wanted to happen.
Yeah.
But
I wanted like everyone with a Valyrian steel sword to get a one-on-one with a White Walker or something.
yeah,
That does seem a little basic, but they did enough basic things that it doesn't matter.
I would have substituted a lot of the basic things for that one.
So, I mean, it kind of goes in a fairly classic battle sequence, just extend it out, and they throw a couple other things in there to try and break it up. And I think this was needed, and I really enjoyed most of it. It's just a lot of slaughter, and the beginning. One thing I like about the Battle of the Bastards is I feel like the tactics and everything going on is pretty clear. This one, maybe it's because it was dark. It was pretty hard to see.
Yeah.
it's hard to follow a few things. Like, okay, which line of the defenses are they through? Which walls are they coming over? At what point? How far have they infiltrated? Like, some of that is a little disorienting, and not in like a Saving Private Ryan way where it's like, oh, this is how war's disorienting. But I don't know what else they could have.
Yeah,
really
do you
done.
think that's what they were going for? Because the whole time I was watching, I'm like, this just. I'm gonna get this out in the open. I'm disappointed by this episode, to be honest. On a lot of fronts, it wasn't awful, but I think the Battle of the Bastards is a much better battle episode. I feel like it's a much more clear battle. Everything that's what impressed me most about the first time I watched Battle of the Bastards. I'm like, I know exactly what's going on all the time, yet it still feels chaotic. I feel suffocated. I feel empathy for everyone in this. Whereas in this, I couldn't see shit half the time.
I think there was too much that had to get done. There was too many different characters to serve, elements to the battle, and it makes sense because this is something we've been leading up to for the whole time. So I think I went in with such a mindset that I'm pretty forgiving of most of the confusion. They shot this over 55 nights, and I was like, maybe Dawn could have come a little earlier, or we could have done some things to light a little better.
Let's look at one of the things they looked at was Helm's Deep, right? That takes place at night.
Right.
I can see everything way better in Helm's Deep than I can in this.
I need to go back and rewatch that now for comparison's sake.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because I mean, I think just the lighting in Helm's Deep, even like everything feels so clear, and like you were mentioning, kind of tactics and like stakes. Everything is so clear, and that it's visually readable constantly. You don't get lost. And in this, I was like, sometimes they were cutting to places. There was specifically a cut where they like went into the Army of the Dead, but then melded that into a cut of just cloud to cut to Danny and John. And I was like, I don't know exactly where they are.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of that I was like, I wanted to get to the more specific, the smaller conflicts, which those I actually liked a lot more. Once I was focusing on the small number of 15 zombies and like 2 people.
I think the battle gets more readable and also more enjoyable when they get into the walls.
Yeah. I agree.
I think the tactics, like everything that this is what the good guys are now doing to follow their plan or to prevent this or that. They made sense, but then once it really gets into battle and we're not even looking at that, you're right. Some of those transitions were straight up, like, I guess I kind of know where we are, but it was also very confusing. Once they like brought the winter storm in to confuse the heck out of us, that caused some issues where I really didn't know where people were at. It was like the Dementor scene in Prisoner of Azkaban. It's just like, hey, the dragons are just flying through nothingness. I don't.
Yeah, exactly.
Help me make this feel
I
like
need a
this is
frame
productive.
of reference. I need something. Yeah, for sure. I guess should we just break down some characters, some specific character journeys through this whole thing?
Oh well, I mean, let's talk about who. Let's talk about those who died first.
Yeah, let's do it.
And what took them to their death. The first death we get of a named character who's actually been around technically since season 1, I believe, is Dolores Ed.
I don't think they actually show him until 2.
Really?
Yeah.
But he's the commander of the Night's Watch right now, even though there's not really a Night's Watch. But a good friend of the guys. He's a good character. He's very likable, that he dies in a very sensible way. Somehow Sam survives all this, which is like, get off the front lines, fatty. And
Wow.
Look, I would have known to be in the credits. Get on. But we lose Ed. We lose my guy. And he goes down pretty quick. Yeah. Not much to his story.
Yeah, and honestly, that was... I feel like that was a death that I was like, yeah, okay, this is on the like list of people that I'm like, it could go either way, and it's like, good for him. Like, he died in a noble way.
He got a little moment. He saved Sam and everything. And then is next Lyanna Mormont?
Is that the next named character that dies?
Possibly,
I think so.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Which, sweetheart, the creators have said several times she was only supposed to be in one scene, and she's someone who really... And, like, I've enjoyed her almost every time.
Yeah, I love her.
Like, pound for pound, she kills it. So,
yeah, for
literally.
Sure. If we're breaking it down by pounds, she is bringing way more to the table than anyone else.
You killed 40 whites, well, she killed one giant white, and she weighs 12 pounds.
Yeah.
But she was going to be out there. Remember how she came into Battle of the Bastards with only 62? Like, there's got to be no one left from Bear Island. There's those 10
House
dudes.
Mormont is just wiped after this episode.
Yeah.
He's gone.
That's kind of a bummer. Yeah, I didn't think about that. That kind of makes me a little sad.
We'll get to Ser Jorah in a second, but Lyanna kills a giant. That's super dope. I don't think there was much reason for her to live beyond this.
I agree. Yeah.
Other than, like, she's a sweet young lady and would have done a good job rolling. Oh boy!
But yeah, that was a cool. That was a cool death. I was at first very bummed she was just going to be. We were going to watch her be crushed in the hands of a giant.
Yeah.
I was like,
well, at first, even when he first walked through and just like
Just
pushed her
whacked her
aside, I
and
thought,
let her go.
is that it?
yeah.
She's going out.
And I was like,
I was pretty pissed.
Well, like the first time, like when that did happen, I was like, is that it? And then I'm like, she's 12 years old. Yeah, that's probably it. But no, I think the way she went out was really cool, and that was a big hurrah moment. I feel like it's kind of rad.
And then she's risen as a White Walker, and
That's
like, we're fucked.
And I was like, she's the scariest one.
Now she's on the other side. Is Theon next?
No.
Did we really not lose?
Oh yeah,
any?
Theon's before Jorah. Yeah.
Yeah.
This
No,
is
Barrack.
This is like
you're right,
pissing me
Barrack.
off now. Like,
Oh, Barrack. Yeah, we can talk
oh yeah, I
about
forgot
Barrack.
about Barrack.
We
Yeah.
get
But
Little
yeah,
horror
it's a short
sequence.
list. It's a much shorter list than I
We
thought
all
we'd be
expected,
going
I think.
through
Yeah.
coming into this. So
Barrack, who could have really died last season. I kind of wanted. You know what I noticed is none of these deaths had last words. Really, Theon had a last exchange that served, but he had him and Jorah had these dying breaths where I expected some like "I'm ready to go this time" or
yeah.
22 second times the charm, and he
I will
died.
say I loved Jorah's though.
Yeah.
Like what else is there to say? You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
he died exactly how he wanted.
Yeah, and that was like a more emotional moment for me than I thought it would be because I figured he'd be gone soon.
to. Yeah.
Because he has to. What else is he gonna do? And so, yeah. But that one was like a really emotional moment that I actually really liked. I thought it was a really good way to. close out
Barrack
his
and Theon
character.
are all. I mean, technically redemption. A slightly less Barrack, but he is a lord who kind of goes off the rails to go do this Brotherhood without banners thing. But
Well, and him and Arya's relationship is not the greatest before
Right.
he
He's on the
sacrifices
list.
himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate it, but I wasn't wild about his death just because of how many times he's been brought back.
Right.
I mean, I get it. He got Arya to that point where something's been revealed to her, and like you can look at it like almost, for lack of a better term, butterfly effect. Like everything has to be in like the exact spot, like it's supposed to happen or whatever. But I don't know. For me, I don't know. For him being the brought back the Lord of Light so much, I felt like it just could have used a little bit more oomph in his death. But
I mean, he got destroyed like 3 times. I thought he was dead twice before he actually died.
And then he kept running. I was like, how is
I
he
mean, not necessarily
moving
his
so
death,
fast?
the thing he did, I should say.
Oh, okay.
Like his death's fine. I'm fine with how. Like I'm fine with him getting hit by a horse, but like what he does before that needs to be a little bit bigger for me. But
Yeah.
And then Theon, who I'm not lukewarm on him getting some sort of redemption, and I actually think the way he ultimately does it, coming back to the place where he was raised, it actually comes full circle really well. I had a couple issues with things in between, mostly how easily he rescued his sister and his whole season 7 arc. But what he did this year actually worked, and I don't know, like running at the Night King, like maybe throw the spear if it's tipped to Dragonglass at another one or something. I don't know. Try zagging,
Yeah.
Don't you think you would have learned from Rickon?
I mean, I would have honestly been fine with the duel I was talking about happening there.
Yeah.
I mean, and
Yeah.
maybe him, and like not a very long one either. Just one where it's tense and it may be over quickly, but at least like Theon it's not a swing and a miss with a jab of a spear.
Right, yeah.
And Theon, I mean, he fights well. He's known to be a really good fighter, period, and especially a good bowsman. You remember in season 1, is it, where he's out with Robb and Bran, and
he saves Bran's life
from Tonks's friends. Yeah, so good for Theon. Good way to go down.
But how do you? I mean, you talked about it a little bit. How do you guys all feel about, I guess, his whole story arc? This coming to an end here. Does this? Because I know we talked about last time. About not necessarily him ever finding full redemption, but kind of reaching like a nice end point. Do you feel like we reached that? Are you satisfied with it?
I mean, for me personally, like for what that is, I like it. Like Theon has never been the main character, right? I mean, he was kind of much more important, or got a lot more screen time in seasons 4 and stuff. But I guess for me, like it's it's as satisfying as I think anything they could do at this point. I think this season, even the little things they did with him went a long way to making me care. Like we talked about the reunion, the first episode, like the reunions and that, there were a lot that maybe didn't hit me the way I wanted to, but like the stuff like Theon and Sansa's reunion, like that really did feel like a really good emotional moment, and kind of what you were saying, kind of this full circle moment where he does return. And honestly, I think we probably all knew Theon was gonna die, right? Because we talked about that last week. Like he's gonna be in there with Bran, like the dude's not living. So for me, it worked. I'm fine with it.
What about you, Riley? It worked for you?
I think it worked. I was kind of ready for him to be done, honestly. I think that he got to that point and Bran was like, oh yeah, you're a good dude or whatever. And so it was a good time. Yeah,
I really agree. I think I was surprised. I was surprised how satisfied I was with that. Like, it's not like, oh, Theon's a great person. I don't necessarily echo Bran's thoughts, but him hearing that at the end and him kind of, that's what his character needed, and I don't know, you saw it on his face. I love his performance. Yeah. So just seeing him and knowing all that he's gone through, and just Ramsay's ghost haunting every moment of that man's life, and just seeing that all come to closure, that was one of the parts of the episode I was actually most satisfied about, probably.
I think, and I think, like, bring up the performance too. I think he's had a consistently on the top end of performances.
Yeah, Alfie Allen, shout out, Lily Allen's little brother.
Yeah, does she have a new album out that we can play?
Lily Allen, sponsored by Lily Allen.
Sponsored by Lily Allen's new album that is not out yet, but
it's a coming. But let's go from people that died to people we thought were gonna die. We really expected, I think, Grey Worm #1 to go down, and there's a point when it seems like he is on the front line, and he just, again, endurance. His endurance, I might believe, over anyone else's.
Is this a good time to talk about every Dothraki? Well, I mean, they're like the stragglers that came back.
Every foreigner.
Died.
Let's give a shout out to the front line for a sec.
Yeah, everyone not from Westeros, besides Grey Worm, essentially was sacrificed on the altar of standing in front of the zombie wall that came, and that's weird.
Man,
Dany's not a great leader, maybe?
But those weren't, like... Here's the thing. I don't want to dehumanize anyone because I don't approve of the way that these people have lived their lives or have been forced to live their lives. But we had the Dothraki, not good people.
Yeah, no, listen, I agree. But if I'm looking at it from purely the concept of imperialism, this is classic, like, Britain in the 16 and 1700s bullshit.
Yeah. Would you rather lead the Mongols or someone else, okay? And then the Unsullied, they wanted to die. They're like, this doesn't even hurt.
This doesn't even hurt.
They were forced into this lifestyle.
I will say,
yeah, but they're so emotional. Because that happened so young, they're so emotionally past that.
Right, like Grey Worm. He's so emotionally
There's
past
exceptions
that.
to every rule, okay? I before E, except after
how
Z.
many of those exceptions were offered on the altar of this war?
They were going to whorehouses just to like feel like they had a mom again.
You're right.
Like,
maybe there's a little humanity there than I thought.
Something.
Anyways, let's talk about other stuff. I do want to point that out. That was something that was
a little different from normal like battles and movies. Was all of a sudden the Dothraki are just charging. Like, we haven't seen this.
There was no call. There was no Braveheart moment. There was no, like, charge. They were just like...
There was no Theoden speech. It was just...
We got magical
we're on
flashlights.
fire.
No one else saw what was going on, so they're just like, oh, shit, are they leaving?
And the overhead fire shot was super dope.
That was
really cool, yeah.
It felt like something they did just so they could have the visual of it, which was awesome.
Pretty dope, yeah.
How that whole thing played out visually was awesome. It's another one of those things that's like production-wise and like flow-wise, that's something I have a big problem with this episode of, is like things like that. It's just like, oh, they're going, and then you've got like the transitions within the walls too. It's like all of a sudden there's this battle going on, and then all of a sudden Arya's now in the video game stealth section. Like we never saw her really like go into the building or like get a sense of what's going on. Versus those, we don't hear the battle outside. That whole time I was like, oh, is it like...
that's true.
Is it like the post-apocalypse outside
very thick
right now?
walls, very thick walls. But yeah, I mean, I feel comfortable where Arya was. I think the fact that, like, a handful of the whites have gotten in and infiltrated these areas and are just kind of meandering around, that was random. But a lot of the inside stuff was
They were on their
pace-changing and
scripted
worked.
paths, wandering.
No, I saw. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I like the points that they go to.
Yeah.
I thought the transitions were sloppy.
Yeah. There's some interesting transitions. We talked about the ones through the storm. Another thing is, especially at the end when pretty much we go through every character and we have to get very close to them dying, which is a trope that Game of Thrones hasn't done a ton.
Yeah.
Except maybe for like Battle of the Bastards, but it was so focused. Like this one, we go through 10 people and I'm like, okay, so obviously real time is not passing. We are jumping, okay, back. Let's see where they were at for that 45 seconds.
Yeah, exactly.
Because otherwise those people would have been dead. And I don't remember a lot of that happening before this. It's more of a movie thing. I can accept it, but it did take me out of it just a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's that shot where the whites first attack Theon and his crew.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, they're getting overrun in 3, 2, 1. Like, and then we cut back like, oh nope, they're still shooting guys, apparently.
Can we talk about that useless little hoe in the wheelchair who I'm
Oh
a
my
little bit
gosh.
more into recently? I think he's somewhat humanized and being more effective, but he could have been like, I'm an all-seeing person, or I'm looking at these crows, let me give you some advice, or let me warg into something helpful.
Yeah,
I thought he was going to
do
warg
something.
into one of the dragons. Like
Yeah.
that's been my thing since he met the 3 out of everything and told me he was going to fly. I was like, that's happening at some point.
Yeah.
And still
Yeah.
he still could warg into Drogon, but it seemed like he could do something more this episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Warg into Nymeria and her wolves, and
Yeah, we could have. Oh, by the way, Ghost goes in the initial charge. We don't see him again, do we?
I was on Twitter, and in the like preview for next week, there are 2 dragons and Ghost is there.
I
So
saw that there were 2 dragons.
they're
I did want to
all
bring that up.
still
That
alive.
Rhaegal, because Rhaegal and Viserion were like ripping each other's throats out, and you could see that Viserion, when he comes back and John's like, I'm gonna fight him, I'm gonna hide behind this rock, like in the first task of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, and you can see that like his like the stuff's coming out of his neck, like he's a little disheveled, but
Yeah.
I never felt like either of them was for sure dead, so I guess that doesn't shock me, but it's really good. If Nymeria came, that would be dope. I think if they need more manpower and they bring the second sons over from Essos, that would be dope. And then Ghost being there, I think all those things living is okay with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say, just to kind of talk about this too real quick, John, kind of a non-factor in this
Yeah.
battle. Like that was kind of
yeah.
a bummer to me also, is I wanted a moment for him.
considering
Because-
this is kind of his storyline.
Yeah, and kind of like this whole season, I feel like the first 3 episodes of this have kind of been that, where it's
Yeah.
like John has kind of been sidelined in a weird way. And I feel like when you have an hour and a half battle, you can find some moments to have Jon Snow do something
Yeah.
cool. And so that was a little bit of a bummer for me. And also his tactic of, hiding behind that wall and then yelling at a dragon. Luckily, Arya
Yeah.
stabbed that bitch before and he just crumbled.
His whole sequence
But-
right there is the most, like, after the video game
So-
stealth section, it was like this. That was the most video game moment I've ever seen in like a movie or
Yeah.
a show or anything.
That's
the
the
dragon
last
that's like
shot of-
exploding with fire out of its throat, and you like have to like go behind cover. And he even does like what I would do in a video. I'm like, now's my shot. Run out. Oh shit! Get back.
He was on
Yeah.
he was on expert mode.
That
Was
was like straight from Dark Souls for me. Like I've done that exact same
Was
thing.
he trying to get to the Godswood that whole time? Is that where
I believe
Because
so.
he thought
I think
that's
he was
where
trying
they-
to
Say
find him,
Bran.
dude. There was a point where like he's already been in the court, and then he like comes back in the court. I just want to be like, oh shit, man, I've been here before. I go in circles.
Those guys are still fighting though. They're going through the same animation.
Oh, he does. You're right. I think that what he has, I think his grand destiny is more to do with the conflict of the throne. I was fully expected it to follow the cliche of him killing the Night King, but I love that it didn't. That
I
was
do
a
too.
very
Yeah.
positive subversion for me.
Yeah, I wish, but there was that moment when he was facing down the Night King.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have had
A couple of sword
something.
exchanges.
Yeah, something
Yeah,
there.
I agree.
But yeah.
Mostly he just rides a dragon mediocrely, and then
I mean, I do want to touch on that dragon fight a little bit.
Yeah.
That was something that we've never seen
Yeah.
ever in anything before.
Yeah.
And I think they did an admirable job. I thought it was
Yeah.
really good. I thought, I mean, monster fights are always hard.
yeah, and they
Like-
didn't make it last too long.
Yeah.
So let's say about Pacific Rim 1, especially, like, 2 things just fighting against each other for that long can get really uninteresting, and I think they did a decent job, and I think this did too. It didn't linger on it. Everything that they did made sense. I'm a little pissed Drogon didn't fly away a little faster when the zombies started overrunning.
Yeah, that's some dumb shit. But I will say, some of my favorite shots in this, there was like that shot of the two dragons above the storm in the open sky,
really
which
cool.
was really rad.
Really cool.
Yeah, so there's some
Weird
really cool
like
stuff.
Jaws type of moment where he's like coming up from underneath.
Yeah.
I mean, so this is the end to something that we saw the hints of in the pilot. This is the end of. I mean, we're obviously really invested in King's Landing, but it's kind of crazy to think, well, one, I'm very happy Bran was not the Night King. Let's start there. But this is the end of one of the more mythical side of this grand thing that we've been watching. And maybe it's the less interesting side. I think we were watching with Justin, and he kind of inferred that, like, this is not the most interesting part of Game of Thrones, which I understand, but I really enjoyed what they did, and this is something they've built to and makes complete sense for this story. I'm excited for part 2, but it's interesting to think, oh, that's it. Like the whole, the wall thing, the mystical creatures that we don't understand thing, like it's presumably done.
Yeah. Well, okay. And here's my question, because we saw that moment where he wasn't burned by the fire, right?
Right.
By the dragon fire. I hope they don't. But do you think that there's more to reveal about that? Like we were talking about whether he was a Targaryen or not. At this point, I feel like that should be done. We should just leave it how it is. But it was a very weird thing that was like so in your face of like, yep, Dragonfire didn't kill him.
Yeah. Well, like one of the things you say, like, yeah, these mystical creatures that we don't understand that have been around the entire show. Like that's another thing where it's like, now's not the time to unravel that. I think, especially when you've got 3 episodes left. Like, let's just leave it. Let's be like, yeah, we didn't understand these things, but they're fucking gone, so we're done.
Well,
you know, like
I think a lot of people are going to be upset not to know, like, okay, what are they want to know what's more going on with the Children of the Forest. What are the root? We kind of know the roots of the Night King. Like it was a human who the Children of the Forest.
Yeah, I feel satisfied with the answers we were given there, and everyone seems to think there's more coming. At least what I read online, I'm like,
I don't think there's more coming. I think in this or before that Night King died, they expect to know, like, oh, is the Night King a Stark? But you know what? The guy who got stabbed who turned into the Night King was like a regular looking sandy blonde dude. Yeah, and I was like, that makes me think it's not Bran. It's not Bran the Builder, or it's not a Targaryen. And the Targaryens, by the way, are a lower house in Valyria. Until the Doom of Valyria, they are not a factor. They were just smart enough to get an outpost on Dragonstone in Westeros. So it's people just got to remember the Targaryens were not important back then. In fact, they might not even have been around or thought of back then.
They're basically just very good real estate people.
They are, yeah. They're like, Valyria is the most beautiful place in the world, but that the West is really coming up. Yeah, we ought to go get some stuff over there.
How does this sound to you? A beachfront property.
Made out of rocks.
No one else over there has dragons.
Man, I was waiting to see if they were gonna make like a huge mistake and have the Night King talk at some point in this episode.
I didn't want it, but at some point I was like, explain something to me.
I just wanted when he gets stabbed to be like, oh! And then just crumble into ice.
I was expecting him to walk into the woods and then Bran being like, hello, and then say some old Targaryen name and him be like, yes, it is me! I am here for you, Brandon!
Were you a little disappointed Brandon at Warg into a dragon?
Anything?
Yeah, just do anything useful
you lazy
for once.
piece of crap.
It just turned into like when they showed up at the tree again, and he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna take this time to just warg, like just protect me."
What was he
like,
warging into during that? The whole time was the crows.
The crows.
I mean, they were already there, so like, what are his crows doing? He's like, well, I'm just gonna enjoy some flying in case I die. Like,
you'll never walk again.
I'm just gonna let all these people around me die with doing nothing to help them. Like,
I don't think it will be. I'm like, it'd be interesting if it's revealed in another episode of he was doing something important during that time. Or he was going in the past to find something. I don't know. It just seems weird that he was just warging.
Yeah, what's his role?
Into nothing.
Yeah, well, that
it's
is,
useless.
I guess, I mean, he is the leftover thing from this storyline, right? That hasn't been tied up. So, yeah, what does he do? I mean,
he just,
I don't know.
Yeah,
I would be okay with them touching on some more reveals about him. Maybe like, Act 3 or an epilogue type of thing.
Yeah.
Where like everyone's got to leave Middle Earth, and he's like, I gotta go, but here's why, because
I've got to go found Delta Airlines.
We do have 3 more like 80-minute episodes.
Right,
I think one of them's a little shorter, but like There's a lot
I
to
mean, one
go.
of them's got to be a battle.
So yeah, and I'm hoping that's the second to last one, which has been a trope. Like, I'm a little battled out at the moment.
Yeah.
I didn't dislike this episode by any means, but I think that is the best part of Cersei and everything. But there's got to be some fighting done. Also, I'm kind of cringing at some of the internal politics that are going to happen now.
Yeah, for sure.
Because the politics right now are so much more emotionally charged than when Littlefinger and Varys were involved. By the way, Varys, man, talk about the guy who's like had nothing to do
Yeah.
all year. Oh, let's.
He was recruiting all those kids down there.
That's right.
He was like, hey,
You're going to be a little
after
bird.
this is done, you
You're
want
gonna be a
to get some
little
information?
bird?
Right, I got candy.
Let's kind of go lightning round style throughout the rest of these characters. So, Riley, tell us about the crypts. What did you think about the crypts? What
About
went
the
down there?
Bloods.
What was important?
I think that they covered the crypts really well. I liked the moment when Sansa and Littlefinger were like behind that.
Tyrion, you mean?
Yeah.
Just
Who
because
did
he
I
has
say?
little fingers.
Oh,
doesn't
Littlefinger,
mean
yeah.
he's little finger.
Whoops. Yeah. When Sansa and Tyrion
You were just saying
sitting
that
there-
because there was like a slight spark of romantic energy for like a split second, so you thought it was Littlefinger, maybe.
Yeah. So anyway, Sansa and Tyrion are sitting there. I liked their moment because I didn't super love their last moment they had, like when he just got to Winterfell and she was kind of like super icy towards him.
Yeah, and we kind of talked about that. Yeah,
Yeah.
how that was kind of a bummer.
Yeah, and so I liked that she kind of acknowledged that he was like a good thing in her life than like the moment they had before they kind of went out, and I assume they were kind of defending the people.
Yeah.
They didn't show
Tyrion
anything.
seemed to just go next door and
Yeah.
hang out.
It was like
gonna
such
stand
a,
right
it was a
here.
weird moment. Do you think they were
Yeah.
trying, because we were talking this after the episode was over a bit, were they trying to make it seem like they were going to take their own lives? Do you think that's something they wanted us to think? And then they're like, just kidding, he just went around the corner.
That's weird. I didn't.
I didn't
'cause
get
I
that
didn't think it was a
vibe
suicide
at
thing.
all.
That didn't come to your mind
I
at
could
all?
get the hint a little.
Oh.
I thought they were just gonna. I thought they were going out in a blaze of glory.
Yeah,
like,
that's
I thought
what
it was
I
gonna
thought
be
too.
like,
I thought
if
it was
we
suicide
die,
for
we're
sure.
going out. Like we're gonna fight.
Maybe Katie and I have just watched too much Walking Dead, which is any amount of Walking Dead. But,
That's what they always do on that one.
yeah. Yeah, wow.
I've seen the first 7
Okay,
minutes.
well,
of that
I
pilot
guess
so
my
many
question
times.
isn't valid then.
I mean, it's still a valid question.
Yeah.
But yeah, they do just go around the corner. Not really a blaze of glory either. It's just
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah.
Perfect timing.
Because I feel like they built it up and they could have done. There was time in the episode for them to do something cool there, but they didn't. It was just kind of a lot of like making eye contact with Varys and children, and then it cut away.
Yeah.
And that
Crypts
was
definitely
weird.
could have been a little more interesting, especially after there was so much hinting at it's the safest place, and we knowing there's dead bodies down there, and he can raise the dead. I thought if we got a return character, or they had to at least kill, like they had those daggers, maybe kill 1 or 2, make it a little bit more. But it was mostly just an area to go to kind of create a different type of fear. T-Mac, why don't you take us through our main battle lieutenants who survived? So our Jamie, Brienne,
yeah.
Pod, Tormund.
well, honestly, we don't get a lot. I mean, a lot of those people are on the front line, and somehow that's a little bit of an issue I have with this episode. Is okay, the wave, the giant tsunami of dead bodies is cool, but there's no way you can convince me that how they were swallowing up the front line, that anyone made it out of that.
Yeah.
Like, but we got named characters in there, so they had to.
Presumably everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone who was named
but yeah,
on the front lines.
Tormund,
essentially.
Brienne, Grey Worm, Jamie, they're on the front lines, and they all come back inside.
Sam was on the front lines.
Yeah, Sam's on the front lines. Dolores,
Gendry was
Dolores
on
Ed
there.
was the only one that
Yeah.
the Hound was out there. I'm missing one. There's one more. Shoot.
Gendry?
No, not Gendry. Oh well. Anyway, the kind of same thing happens to 90% of them. They all just kind of once they go back inside, we don't get like anything really substance for any of those people. We just see glimpses of them fighting. The exceptions would be the Hound and Beric, and Arya, of course.
Yeah.
And the Hound, and those three kind of end up together. Arya is going through her stealth mission, then is it after the stealth mission she falls off the roof, and the Hound's like, gotta go find her.
That was
that's prior to
before.
that, yeah.
Oh, yeah, he's like scared of the fire,
Yeah.
and calls Beric a whore in that moment.
Yeah.
And then they see her falling off the roof, and then he like springs into action, and then they lose her, I guess. But then they find her again, after the checkpoint of the video
Yeah.
game. And that's when Barrick dies. And then the Hound and her go into this room. They board up the door. And Melisandre's just shooting the shit in that room. And they're like, oh, yeah, we talked before. Let's talk about our last conversation about eyes. Yeah, different color eyes, red fish, two fish, one fish, blue fish, two fish. I can't remember. And then she's like, oh, yeah, blue fish. And she's like, blue fish. And then she runs.
And the Hound's like, blue fish?
And then they run off, and she runs off in the opposite direction, and we're meant to forget about her.
Yeah.
I thought they did a decent job at it. And when it happened, I was like, dope. I was like, whose face could she take? Because that's something
That's what I
interesting
was
is
thinking
we
too,
haven't seen Arya use her faceless man skills really since the twins, right? Has she taken any? A lot of people thought she would come back as Littlefinger just for... There's a lot of random little theories out there that I think this episode kind of eliminated the possibility of that kind of make me happy. Because some people just dig in so much that I'm like, you're not even enjoying this. You must really like Westworld. Which is funny if you've seen both seasons of Westworld.
Well, I will say, I loved the Arya stuff. I don't know if I'm just
too.
like so biased in her direction that I'm just like gonna enjoy anything they throw at me with her. But I thought all her stuff was really good. The fighting on the ramparts, where it's like she's very competent and good, and then
She like
very
dives
scared.
down the stairs over the zombies.
Yeah, that was really cool. And it was funny. The weapon that she had built for her was dropped pretty early on.
Yeah.
yeah.
It was just an excuse to, get some.
Yeah, that's fine. That's cool. If that works, I guess I should try.
It's never worked for me. Whenever I ask a girl to make me a weapon.
I would love you to craft me this weapon.
Can you craft me a sheath for my spear?
Can you bring it to me in the stables? What fucking stables?
The stables. It's just the best. It's the best place to get a spear. That's all. That's what the novels say. Okay.
But I thought I liked all of her stuff, and I think that the stuff in the library, like we keep referring to as the video game segment, but it was like some of the better crafted moments in this episode. Like some really great tension built up, and
It was a good change of pace.
yeah. And that was really fun. So I really enjoyed all of her stuff, and seeing Arya legitimately scared. We haven't seen that in a while,
Right.
and so to know that that's still in her, I think is cool.
I
don't
think
know
a lot
why,
of her
but,
confidence comes from knowing people and people's intentions and knowing where to position herself based on observing people and how they behave. Where when you're dealing with mindless undead things, that goes out the window, kind of.
yeah, for sure.
I think that's like the similarity with her and the Hound, because you saw that from the Hound too. He was like frozen because he was so just scared and giving up until he saw her, and then that kind of gave him a purpose again, which
Yeah.
was really cool.
Well, we'll say most of those people who survive, they have some business stuff. Obviously, Jaime, Cersei's his lover sister, is still alive. Brienne and Jaime may still get some sort of resolution. Although I think if they would have had a nice little moment on the battlefield and then Brienne would have died, that would have worked for me.
Yeah, it would have worked for me too. We were actually talking about this on the way over. Because Brienne really, in the last episode, she got what she wanted, and it was really beautiful, and it would have served as a fine end to her story, I think. Like,
I
her
also
getting
think
that night ship and
I keep looking at a lot of these characters as inevitable deaths, like they have to die. And I did think more people realistically should have died in this episode, but there is a point where it's like, well, you know what? She would also be great at leading a Kingsguard or something.
For
Like,
sure. Yeah.
There is a great future. Before the season, I was listening to a podcast where they were like, who left alive would make up really good small councils if you're going to make them. I'm like, some people do have to live. And I think some people felt earmarked for death. And now I'm like, well, now that they survived this one, it wouldn't actually surprise me if they survive the next one. I think you're doing a disservice if too many of those main characters survive.
Yeah.
But I think coming into this battle, we're inevitably like a lot of these lieutenants and fighters got to go down. And I don't know, the way they survived was pretty hardcore, but the fact that they survived doesn't come off as a horrible thing to me.
yeah. I guess for me too is just the idea that their death is not the story in this case,
Right.
but I do think that it's a big choice, and it creates more interesting situations, and especially with this, with the idea of Brienne's death happening, that is something that could really put Jaime in an interesting place, and for sure cement him on this side going into stuff in the South. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If he loses something like that, it makes whatever his next choice is. Maybe his next choice is to just go all the way back to Cersei, which we already know she's got some weird shit going on. But like either way, whatever choice he makes after that, to me, is more interesting. And so, so I'm still in the dark as to where exactly the next things are going to happen for some of these characters. But yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's a good point you bring up. I don't feel like you should ever, especially since the show's known for, main characters dying unexpectedly, you should never force yourself into that. Be like, oh, we've got a checklist to hit of, we need, named characters to die unexpectedly because that's what our show is. But I think you bring up good story points for certain characters. And my biggest gripe with it is, at this point, I am a little bummed out how much time we've spent on the Night King, for how little of a threat he feels at this point now. Because
you mean specifically in this season, or like overall?
I think the whole show.
Oh, okay.
The amount of time we spent over the whole show, because it feels like, there wasn't, like we talked about earlier, there wasn't any bigger reveals, which I didn't necessarily need.
Yeah.
But what I did need is, with how much of a threat I've been told they are, I don't feel that unless people I know are dead from them.
True.
You can kill a bunch of nameless people, which they did.
Yeah.
I don't feel it just feels like a little bit of my time has been wasted. Not as much as it could have.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm a little bummed by that too, and the story points you mentioned with certain characters that could affect them. Yeah. So I mean, like, honestly, Pod doesn't need to live.
Okay.
Kill Pod.
Okay, don't just do that to the hordes of King's Landing out here.
Yeah,
Pod is at a great.
Pod has given his gift to the world.
Listen, no,
only a few times.
Still need the gift in Westeros.
He's grown so much. One thing I always actually thought, maybe up until the end of last season when it kind of hit me, that this would be the final episode, or not episode, but the final battle, and the human conflict would come first. So I get where you're coming from. At the same time, we are so invested in King's Landing and everything that's gone on there that this kind of eventually did make sense to me. I think we've pivoted so much towards it's the living versus the dead. But, I mean, we only have 3 episodes left, so it's not like we had the Night King thing be like, oh, season 7 ends because this was a theory that season 7 would end one of the major conflicts, because when they announced the final 2 seasons would be shortened, and then the last season would end the other. So I think it got its due, but it does make sense that we've been seeing this as this grander evil. But I think they found out that, the more interesting conflict is the human conflict.
Oh, I agree with that for sure. I just think you can still have that interesting conflict and have this be something that doesn't feel so... It just feels like a written plot device more than it does an actual story. Like, it doesn't feel... And obviously, there's a challenge and a hurdle there when your villain is mindless, right? Like, that's already difficult enough to write. When it becomes something that doesn't really end up feeling like as big of an impact as it should be, it just feels like a distraction so that Cersei has a chance. And so I don't know, that rubs me the wrong way. Yeah,
it would have been interesting,
but it's not awful. I don't want to point out like, oh, it totally sucked. I mean, there's things that work, things that didn't work.
If we talk about our big 5 characters, as far as depending how you see Cersei, our big 5 good guys, you have Dany, Jon, Sansa, Arya, and I'm missing someone, but it doesn't matter. Oh, Tyrion. None of them died. So maybe it would have been more interesting to think like one of those major pieces has died, because that also creates an emotional turmoil within the other ones. I'm interested to see how much they display how many people lived through this. What do they have left? Because this could be a thing where it's like, well, we destroyed everyone in the north and everyone we brought from Essos, but guess what? The vast majority of the population of Westeros is below the neck, which means really the living are in pretty great shape. Even if we lost 20,000 living humans, Westeros is the chair they want. Most of those people are still going to be there. That's the thing. If at this point, if Sansa wants the north, she should be like, hey, you can go rule over like 5,000 people up there. Sure. That's like, you want to be the mayor of Montana? Why don't I throw in Wyoming and North Dakota too?
Listen, you can have everything beyond the wall too.
Yeah. Uh-huh. I hear there's some nice caves.
Oh man,
But that's about it.
Yeah. No, that's. Yeah. Why would you want the North at this point?
Someone we haven't talked about because he hasn't been in the past 2 episodes is Braun. Was sent north to kill one of the Lannister boys.
He never made it, apparently.
Yeah,
Was
Was
it
he-
north,
I can't remember
though?
if he was sent north. I feel like it was framed as if they survive,
Yeah.
Gotcha.
you're
I
gonna
thought,
That's what
kill
it
them.
was.
but was he sent north and to like wait out the battle?
I
and
don't
then...
think. I don't know. I don't know specifics.
Yeah,
on that,
I wonder
but-
how he's going to where he's gonna pop up.
Yeah.
He would have been a fun one to have here.
Yeah, like
Yeah. I mean,
I was thinking...
Braun's a fun one to have wherever you're at.
Well, I feel that way about Tormund too, who I also am like, other than it might be funny just to see him in the South and be like, oh, these furs are really warm. Other than that, like, he might have been the only character who had 0 ties left where it was like, we should keep him.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm glad he's around. He's a fun guy.
He is fun.
We can keep that love triangle going.
Yes.
We should touch on Dany real quick. She doesn't do anything out of character. She is, for a while, just zigzagging and trying to kill whites, and she almost loses her dragon. She loses the ultimate friend zone. Someone put on Twitter, they were like, if friend zone's a religion, then Jorah's Jesus. I wish Jon at some point, though, right now would have been like, look, I don't want to lead. Let's just do this. And maybe have some moment for them, but they just seem to be like, we're going to tag team this dragon shiz and do a mediocre job of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot, I feel like, with Dany that really moved that stuff forward. Dany is who we have known her to be.
I think her character arc has kind of become cemented, kind of until the very last step. I mean, we did see her wield a blade for the first time.
Yeah,
Some whites.
yeah, that's true.
Not that that's a huge character moment or anything, but it's like it's an out of character moment almost in a way. Like
Self-preservation.
I mean, I am excited to see. I think, the last episode 2 was like so great. I loved pretty much all of it. And like that moment with her and Sansa, that scene I really loved. And so, I do think that's hopefully where we're going to see the next steps for that character and the arc. And I do think coming out of this battle, I think when I was watching Arya, when we kind of saw that, it's like, yeah, this, you have to be changed by this. Like, this is the type of event that has to change you fundamentally as a human being, and the way you see things. And so to see the aftershock of this in next week, I think will be really enlightening as to what the rest of this show is for sure going to be about. You know what I mean? So
That's what's interesting. There's a lot of time left, and I'm really curious to see what they do with it. I say a lot of time, although I'm going to be very sad that it's over in 3 episodes. But obviously, we have to have the planning for the battle, and the fallout, and that all makes sense. But so much interpersonal stuff has to get resolved, and I think that might be why we didn't lose some other people, is because they still have such interesting things that can be worked out while we're more looking at the human aspects of this war.
Yeah, for sure.
But it was crazy. It was fun. I'm gonna have to let this sit. I rewatched episode 2 last night. I think I might, if I can find an hour and a half free. I am curious to rewatch this to see what makes better sense, what doesn't, and just to see how the beats of this really moved along. But less death than we thought. I think that's a big takeaway. Yeah. And some really good moments, some great individual battling. In general, a little bit of a mess when it came to some transitions in the general war, but it was fun. This is one we've waited for a really long time, and it was nice that Arya killed him.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah,
that was a cool moment that we didn't really touch on that very much, but
briefly.
But yeah,
Arya had maybe the best. We kind of talked about Arya having like the library thing, her fighting before that, and then her survival mode to finally her moment where she grabs the dagger and stabs him, which they talk about in after the episode, that she stabs him right where they created him and stabbed him to create the race. So that's interesting to me.
Yeah.
That dagger was it's been around since season 1.
Yep. It's a nice breadcrumb to
used to try and assassinate Bran, and then just kind of jumped around a little bit.
And Bran gave it back, so maybe he knew.
Yeah, well, yeah, no, exactly. When he hands it to Arya, he knows exactly what he's doing and
Yeah.
what's going to happen with it. And so it was kind of hinted at in season 7. In the book, it's drawn there. And then, then Littlefinger brings it back up, gives it to him. So I think that was kind of a cool little poetic kind of thing there. I really interested to see. I kind of wanted some sort of. I mean, I want to see it next episode. Some sort of interaction between Bran and Arya about that. Yeah.
I'm just really curious if we're going to get any more mythological explanation. It seems, and I think I'm okay with it. I read and listen to a lot of things that deep dive a little bit more and want a little bit more mythology. But it is curious to me that there's things that they're like, well, this doesn't, maybe it's not worth going into because it doesn't matter. A lot of people are like, well, can only Targaryens ride dragons? And the creator's like, yeah, but it doesn't seem like that mattered or like that whole blood thing is going to come into play. But there are just little elements of this and little fan servicey things that we're like, it's not that important to delve into. The Children of the Forest, maybe that's more important in the books, but like right here, it's just another element to complicate it.
Well, with only 3 episodes left and what has lacked in the past season and a half of any of that, I don't think you can do that. I don't, at least I don't think you can do that and make it pay off well and read well.
Yeah.
I will say the cynical side of me says these things would feel a lot better if there was a little bit of that foundation and maybe these last 2 seasons were full seasons. You know what I mean? The cynical side of me is like, well, they were restricted by time, so they had to make some tough decisions, and like, I don't know. That's not a good reason.
I don't think. I mean, I totally get that, but I don't think that should ever be an excuse for dropping the ball on something.
Yeah.
At this point, I think the best thing for them to do is just be like, well, fuck it, let's just we answered some of it, and that's good enough.
Yeah.
And it's not bad. It's just it just doesn't reach its full potential. I don't think. Someone
was saying like even if they would have stopped like at halfway through season 6. So season 5, a lot of things have already happened there and are not in the books yet. But they're like, if they would have just stopped there, because they chose not to introduce several storylines, and then like the Iron Islands and Dorne are much less complex than they are in the books. So, like, if they would have stopped there, they would have had to do 10 episode seasons to actually build this out, and it fulfilled just what they started, because obviously there's no way you were going to do everything George put into his books. Like, there's a reason that books 4 and 5 are concurrently going with just different characters, things happening. That would not make for an interesting TV show. So I think they've done the best they could, but I think it's right to say that maybe with 6 more hours or 7 more hours, so you're 3 more in season 7 and 4 more in season 8, they could have carved out some of those bases. But I think we are getting the important things, and it's a lot more fun. I think as soon as the show got as big as it was going to turn into this. And I'm choosing to enjoy it, but I totally get people who are like, oh, we're missing some of how this could have been fulfilled because of how good the foundation was built before the budget exploded, before it had to be a blockbuster.
Yeah.
But I think the ends of the books is going to be a blockbuster, even with the beautiful intricacies it's going to have.
Yeah. And for me, it's like the difference between something being great and being the greatest thing. You know what I mean? And like, I do feel like in these last 2 seasons, there are going to be some things that I think over time it's going to look back on and be like, oh man, I wish there was just a little bit more. You know what I mean? And so, and I can't say it definitively, but I think, I don't know.
I think anything that is not pre-planned out perfectly and that has time and budget restraints, I wonder if we're ever going, like, I think when we talk about the greatest television shows, they have a lot of imperfections that we forgive, and a lot of them were going on the fly. Like, I think one thing is Breaking Bad chose its end date 2 years before the end, and it did a great job of finishing it out, and it's considered now one of the great television shows ever. But the other ones, like sitcoms of old that are considered great, like Seinfeld, MASH, Cheers, they've got so much bad in them.
But I think you can look at recent stuff. Even you look at something like The Sopranos, something like Mad Men. Like there is a consistency in tone across those entire series.
Yeah.
That the whole is greater than the sum of its
You're right.
parts. And so that's not to say that matters. Like that's who gives a shit, at the end of the day. But like,
as long as you're enjoying it, but it would have been nice to end Thrones being like, man, that is the greatest.
Right.
But here's the thing: in a lot of ways, they did something that never was done on television before, and it is the greatest show of its kind. As we further meld, TV and film, it certainly did it like no one else. It'd be interesting to see if they go into this Lord of the Rings show and they're like, it's going to be 5 seasons, 10 episodes per season. We have a plan. It's going to get bigger and bigger, but it's going to be really well rounded out so nothing gets left behind. But there's just too much story in a fantasy story.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I agree and disagree. I don't think you can say you can't do it with fantasy. You can. Like,
to end it perfectly.
Well, yeah. I mean, no, you're not. No show is perfect. That's what not.
How about a book? Is there a book series that lands it perfectly? This is getting very
know,
beyond this episode of Thrones. I apologize.
I just don't know exactly the argument you're making. I'm just saying this isn't for me. It's not as good as it could have been. And I'm not saying Mad Men is perfect. I'm not saying Sopranos are perfect. But what I'm saying is that at the end of the day, the full package that I got, there was nothing. I didn't want to lose any of that.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I wonder in 5 to 10 years going back to Game of Thrones, am I gonna feel the unevenness?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? In a way that I don't or may not with something like Mad Men. So that's the only thing. And I think, like I said, it's the hair's breadth. It's that small difference. But yeah. So
yeah, they did something wonderful and unique, but definitely regardless of stick the landing and how you consider that, there's definitely something that changed after season 6 and even after season 4 that put it in a difficult spot with a different degree of difficulty. It's like how, like with an Oscar movie, like you're comparing a little bottle movie that's super interesting and gorgeous, like The Room, and well acted and fairly small. Room, sorry. Whoa.
Wow.
Against something that is just a higher degree of difficulty. And so, I don't know. I don't feel the need to defend Game of Thrones. I'm going to personally look back and rewatch it and enjoy it. It's just, it is an interesting narrative to see how
Mitchell.
It comes down.
You settle.
If I settled, I would be married by now, Tyler.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know. Because I am disappointed by many things in these, even the past 3 seasons. But there's also been unexpected highs for me. Like we talked about, even in just this season. Like, man, you know what I don't want from Game of Thrones? Anything like a chick flick. But you know what I really weirdly enjoyed was that dragon ride. That was weird as shit. And just like weird things like that have happened over the past 3 seasons. That some things are good, but some things I don't know. I would argue that very, very achievable could have been a noticeably degree better if they would have kept what made the show strong from the beginning all the way through the end. You can still make changes. You can still have some tonal changes that the tone just has to change smoothly. And those are the big gripes I have. The show, like you said, it's gonna go down in history as a game changer. It's done things no one's done before, and it's, I think, for the better, has changed what we can do with television. But yeah, no, I still think we can have moments of just being like, oh man, I wish I would have done this, but I enjoyed X, Y, and Z, and that's how things get improved. That's how things get improved. We say, look, this was great, but we can do better. And
there's going to be prequel series of that. There have been 5 pitched, 2 turned down, 1 greenlit. So it'll be interesting to see if one of the other 2 gets greenlit, and if they do them as miniseries, if they do them as finite, pre-planned things. But I'm excited about it. But the reason I think we're talking about so much about this existentially, or not existentially, but from like a media perspective almost, is that this was an end to half of this giant story, really, in a lot of ways. Even though we didn't lose half of our characters, we lost half of the mythos has come to the end. And I think the most important thing is, like, I look at Harry Potter as something that stuck the landing pretty well, and it created a fairly complex world that nowhere near as complex as this, but it had emotional depth and it had mythos behind it, and the movies don't come up. Like, to me, they're just fun interpretations. I actually enjoy them. A lot of big book fans hate them. I just say, George, please finish the damn books. So even though you got way too convoluted in your story, I can have that fuller ending. I would love that as much as I enjoy the show. I think Winds of Winter is almost done. The other one, I don't even know give someone your notes because you're going to die because you're fat and 70, but just finish it.
I mean, Brandon Sanderson's in the business of shitting out books constantly, right?
I would say let Patrick Rothfuss do it because he's a good writer and they like each other, but guess what? He's not going to finish his third book.
Yeah.
I
don't think I've ever known this. Are you, or maybe you don't have an answer, are you more of the Game of Thrones books person, or are you more of the show? Which one do you
I'm
like
definitely
better?
more show, but part of that is because I have only listened. I've read the first 3 books, and I've listened to all of the books, and only once. So I don't think that my knowledge is there yet. I want to. It is a priority of mine to reread this story and have the books. Like right now, a lot of it is foggy, and I would love to know the books well enough to really differentiate the two.
Gotcha.
Oh, cool.
But they're a big commitment.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
All right. Well, I think the next 2 will be smooth, and it'll be really interesting to see how this one comes down. But it's been a blast. It was very tense and enjoyable to just wonder what was going to happen around every corner tonight.
Yeah,
it's fun.
Thanks for joining us on Rewatchers on the Wall.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.